Welcome to the On List. Today we're going to be talking about a classic fragrance line, a very classic fragrance line. In fact, considered the first proper fragrance line for men. It is Caron Pour Un Homme. I've done things on live stream about this back when I did those on Instagram. I've done all kinds of other segments in different formats, but never done something for this channel. I've done shorts on the individual fragrances, but never a long form video. However, due to the nature of Pour Un Homme, I would think most people watching a deep dive video already know what the fragrance smells like. So this is a video for the nerds, okay? If you're just wanting to know what Caron Pour Un Homme smells like, I'll just tell you. Lavender, vanilla, tonka. That's it. Lavender, vanilla, tonka. You've smelled any kind of aromatherapy in the last 50 years. You've smelled any of the Lush bath bombs. If you've smelled Twilight, which is one of their body sprays. If you've smelled just anything that has a lavender vanilla combination, you already know what this perfume smells like. It is such a fundamental, basic fragrance, and it actually shocks some modern noses how basic it is. But you have to understand the context of the era to get why Caron would make such a basic fragrance and make it the first proper men's perfume. Because there were colognes, toilet waters, things like Neat C10, things like Eucharist by G.O.F. Trumper, things like Blend and Bouquet, all sorts of things that men could wear from barbershops, from other establishments, but they were all colognes, they were all toilet waters. And even though Caron Pour Un Homme is also a toilet water, technically, an eau de toilette, it was composed like a perfume, with richness, with thickness, with body. It is not a grooming product. It is not hygienic product. It is not something you put on as a finishing touch to taking a bath or a shower or shaving your face. It is scent for its own sake. And there weren't really other houses doing that in a overt manner. Some of you are going to say, yeah, but Guerlain had Mouchoir de Monsieur back in 2004, right? Gotcha. 1904. 1904. I was waiting for you to catch that. And yes, technically, if you want to be pedantic, you can say Guerlain had Mouchoir de Monsieur 30 years before Caron had Pour Un Homme, but there's context and nuance to that. And the context and nuance is that Mouchoir de Monsieur was created as a bespoke fragrance for a friend of Jacques Guerlain. It was originally not sold to the public, and when it was sold to the public, because his friend gave him permission to sell it, he didn't bottle it, he didn't label it, he just had the big flasks of it that were kept behind the counter. And if you knew what it was, you could buy your Lalique bottle, your Baccarat bottle, and you could have them fill the fragrance for you, take it like that. It wasn't bottled and released publicly until the 50s. So it was one of those, if you know, you know kind of things. That's how Mouchoir de Monsieur was. So it was kind of underground. Whereas Caron Pour Un Homme, the moment it launched in 34, it had newspaper articles, it had magazine ads, it had radio commercials, it had all that stuff. They wanted the world to know that this was a perfume for men, and thus it was credited as the first, since it was the first one advertised. Never said it was the first one to exist, but it was the first one that declared itself And when you declare yourself something, that counts for a lot more than you think. Just existing before everyone else doesn't always cut it. You need a little more. So, now, the thing about the fragrance, as history goes, Ernest Daltroff tried to make Tabac Blonde a smoker's fragrance that was pitched to men, but ultimately he sort of changed his tune, and by the time that fragrance came out, it was more dedicated to the flappers of the era, you know, the smoking women with the short hair. So some men enjoyed it, but it never came out as a man's fragrance as intended, and it wouldn't be until 34 that he would finally come out with Pour Un Homme. Why just lavender and vanilla and tonka? Why not make a more complex fougere? Because fougere royale existed, Mouchoir de Monsieur existed. Hell, fucking Skin Bracer existed. So why not? Why not do that? Well, that's the thing. The Caron style is not a billion notes all blended together seamlessly. If you watched my video on Caron, I described Daltroff's perfume process as he makes this central accord like a giant tower, like the vaulted ceilings of Notre Dame, this big, massive thing. So my perfume is about orange blossom and amber. My perfume is about patchouli and something else. My perfume is about rose, whatever. And then all the other materials come off like flying buttresses that shore up and support that core theme. And that's how Narcisse Noir was made. That's how Nuit de Noël was made. That's how an Avion was made. That's how Tabac Blonde was made. That's how a lot of those fragrances were made, you know. And that was just what that Daltroff did. Okay, that was his vibe. And thus, when it came time to turn his attention towards men's fragrances, he went, what do men like? Men like lavender, clearly, the shave soaps, the cologne waters. Men like vanilla, same thing, the soaps, vanilla scented soaps for shaving. And tonka is a great fixative, smooth, has a hay-like feature to it. So the lavender and vanilla come together, the tonka underneath, and then a little bit of musk to bring it up. And he used a combination of both civet and nitro musks to give it a bit of a plush, fatty kind of feeling. A little bit powdery, but rich, big, sweet lavender, vanilla tonka. You could almost call it the original clubber. If you want to call it the original clubber, go knock yourself out, because men went to jazz clubs, men went to speakeasies, men went to a lot of high society places, and they cut plenty of rugs, and they did it wearing this fragrance. They weren't, you know, twerking and grinding and bumping and taking Molly and all that shit back in 1934, but they were definitely doing the jitterbug and, you know, dropping Tom Collins in champagne glasses or whatever, or pints of Schlitz, whatever was popular to drink back then. That's what they were doing. And they were doing it while wearing the Caron Pour Un Homme. So yeah, it does have a bit of clubber cred, I guess. Now the thing about this fragrance that really kind of fascinates me is the really rough, inconsistent history it's had over the years. Because if you watch my video again on Caron, you'll know that there was this huge period where after Ernest Daltroff died and Felice Vanapulia had to kind of manage things by herself, then her job was mainly to just maintain the perfumes and not make new ones, really. And then the problem with that was stagnation. And by the time you reach the 60s, and she was selling to Revillion Frères, who would then become Cora Revillion later, they were taking the house down market. And when they took the house down market, it wasn't cool anymore to wear Caron fragrances, unfortunately. It just wasn't cool. So you get a lot of really wonky reformulations and a lot of weird flankers that people don't recognize, don't make sense. There was that Plus Bell's Lavance flanker, which doubled up on the lavender. There was that Champagne Cologne flanker that added bits of Royal Bane or Royal Champagne de Caron into the mix, like a hybrid fragrance. There was just all kinds of goofy shit going on. They did a thing to the fragrance in the 70s and 80s, right before Richard Fraisse came on board, okay? They did a thing in the 70s and the 80s where they, like, changed out the musk and made it more animalic. So they, like, added more civet and they made it really, really musky. So there are some people out there that will, who had those bottles, that will not like the newer stuff because they'll be like, yeah, this was a really manly, macho fragrance with a ton of musk in it. And I'm like, I think that was more of a response to the change of the 70s and 80s towards powerhouse fragrances, big, heavy, musky, leathery things. So that's not the way Pour Un Homme is supposed to be. There was always some animalic in it, but it was really a study of lavender, tonka, and vanilla. It was not intended to be big balls swinging. Wasn't meant to be Antaeus or Koros. So there's a reason why those bottles are out there and still cheap. Like any true vintage bottle of Pour Un Homme that's in the classic style bottle, $1 billion. Can't buy them. Super expensive. But those black plastic cap ones that look like this and they have all the extra musk in them, people can't get rid of them. Nobody wants them. 30, 40, 50 bucks on eBay, Mercari, all day, because it was a really whack period. To use the old 90s term, it was a really whack period for the fragrance. Now, if you like that era of the fragrance, the big musky, husky smelling Pour Un Homme, knock yourself out. It's cheap, like I said, easily replenished. Wear it to your heart's content. Do not let me stop you. Don't let me judge you. But I'm just telling you, that was kind of a malaise era, okay? That was a nadir period. That is not how the scent is supposed to be. And when Richard Fraisse got the job of house perfumer, and he was tasked with kind of remastering the perfume the way you would remaster a film or an old album, bring it back in fidelity with the original formula, he cleaned it up and brought us back to where it's supposed to be. And that's where you see these bottles, which are now the most iconic ones. Most people recognize these bottles, but that's where these came from. And I've got both the last one he did before Ailes Group sold to the Rothschilds, and then I've got the first Rothschild bottle too. This is a Rothschild bottle. You can see the difference is the label on the Rothschild bottle is pleated. It's like a, I can get the camera to focus. It's like a pleated label. You can kind of see it. Yeah, there it is. You can see it's the Rothschild bottles are pleated labels like this. But the old Ailes Group bottles, the ones that Richard Fraisse did, they're just shiny and smooth. They're not plated. That's the big difference. And the scent is not really that far apart. The old Ailes Group ones, or the old Richard Fraisse ones, a little bit more vanilla, a little richer. The Jean Jacques ones, a little more lavender, a little more aromatic. Again, it's like, it's not even Coke and Pepsi. It's like Coke and Mexican Coke. It's just like that. It's not a big enough difference. One has sugar, one has corn syrup. So one's a little sweeter and one's not. It's really not something you can pitch a big argument about, but I know some of you will anyway. Some of you will anyway, because you just need a reason to be right about something. You need a reason to blow up someone's notifications with 50 messages of 500 words each, talking about how you're a superior god brain of perfumes, and nobody really cares, so shut the fuck up. But yeah, don't do that, please. It's not that serious. Now, there was the introduction of a Parfum concentration version of Pour Un Homme. I didn't buy any of those because they were all super limited and they sell out almost immediately, and then they become a bazillion dollars. But there was Impact in 2005. There was Millésime in 2014 to celebrate 80 years. And then there was Parfum in 2017. And then Parfum again just last year in 2024. I've smelled all of those. And I reviewed all of those. Impact was disgusting. Way too much vanilla. Way too ooey gooey. Didn't like it. Millésime was nice. Lots of lavender up front. Very traditional lavender cologne style, which is not really super high fidelity to what Pour Un Homme is supposed to be, but it's okay. If you love lavender, that's for you. 2017 Parfum was good. Again, more in the vanilla direction, but not as bad as the 2005 Impact. So Parfum, 2017 Parfum kind of sat in between Impact and Millésime. So Millésime is lavender and Impact is vanilla. 2017 Parfum was kind of in the middle. And then this new one, 2024 Parfum, is inching more towards the lavender again. So if you're a bigger fan of the lavender than you are the vanilla, you might like this newest Parfum, but get it while you can before it's gone, and then they release another one, and then it's all over again. So now, proper flankers, as in actual flankers that do something different, right? You wouldn't think a fragrance that was over 80 years old would get actual flankers. You wouldn't think Caron would say, hey, let's do what everyone else does, what Dior does, what Chanel does, and make sport versions and O versions and whatever else. But you'd be wrong. You'd be wrong thinking that they wouldn't step into that water, because they did. And in 2015, 81 years after the release of Pour Un Homme, we would finally get sport. So I can only imagine if you had Pour Un Homme way back in the day and you were like, gee willikers, I wish we had a sport version of this fragrance. And your ass is now 95 years old, you're in a hospice, you're on your deathbed, and they finally come out with the sport version, and you're like, yeah, and then you buy it, you spray it on, you smell it, and then you go into cardiac arrest. But hey, at least you can scratch it off your bucket list now, right? This one was not perfumed by Richard Fraisse, because his son, William Fraisse, was getting groomed to take over for him. So those of you who don't know, didn't watch my house Caron video that I did, they hired Richard Fraisse in the mid-80s to make Le Troisième Homme, aka the Third Man. They liked him so much, they made him house perfumer. And he is the son of Andre Fraisse, who did a lot of Lanvin stuff back in the day. So he had a pedigree. He ran Caron from the late 80s all the way until the 2010s, was training his son, William Fraisse, to take his place. And William Fraisse did eventually take his place, 2015. and he came out with this sport flanker, one of two that he did actually. And this stirred a lot of controversy when it came out because, well, it was a big departure from the lavender, vanilla, tonka that we were used to, right? That simple, dandy lavender accord that everyone knows and everyone loves. Well, not everyone, but everyone watching this video, hopefully. So, this guy took a look at basically what Francis Kurkdjian was doing with Masculine Pluriel, which came out just a year earlier in 2014. Took a look at Masculine Pluriel and said, I can do that. But I can do that with the Pour Un Homme DNA. So if you're a big fan of Masculine Pluriel by Maison Francis Kurkdjian, you didn't like that $300 price tag or $275 or whatever it was back then. I'm sure it's more than that now, but you didn't like the price tag, but you like the style of the fragrance. Guess what? Caron's got something just for you. And the key differences is not really leather. Masculine Pluriel has leather. This doesn't really have leather, but it's a similar lavender, dry patchouli, dry citrus. Lemon verbena is in this, which is a very green, lemony citrus smell. And then you get some dry wood, like cedar wood in here. Wood's never really been a part of Pour Un Homme, right? It's not really part of the vocabulary, but dry wood, patchouli, big lavender, that lavandin, high lavandin dose that was found in Pour Un Homme is here, but much less sweet, much greener, much woodier, more citric. Very nice though. It doesn't really read as a sport fragrance to me. I could wear this in a suit. I could wear this in a pressed shirt. I could wear this to work or to a restaurant. Doesn't really read as sport, but I guess compared to the big heavy vanilla tonka lavender that was the original, I guess, yeah, you could call it sport in that, if that's your baseline, you could call it sport. People didn't really know what to make of this though, and it didn't sell that well. Then that leads us to this one. 2018. And this one is Low. Pour Un Homme Low. And I actually really like the satin white cap instead of the chrome cap. I like that. It's nice. So what this does is this plays around with a salty ambergris type of accord. There's a bit of ambergris or ambroxan in the sport, but not enough to really register. But this one goes much harder on that. So if you like that salty sort of what like a typical Ajmal ambergris attar would smell like, or like a Latafa, because Middle Eastern ambergris is very salty. They like it salty. So if you like that Middle Eastern salty style of ambergris, take that, put the Pour Un Homme structure over top of it. So basically the lavender, the vanilla, a little bit of the tonka, the three key ingredients that form Pour Un Homme. Take those materials, put them over that fresh, salty, sort of driftwoody ambergris kind of feel, and you get this. People who think that the original was way too sweet and way too cloying, but they didn't like the sport because the sport was too different and too weird because it had the green notes and the patchouli and the blah blah blah. This is a bit more of a return to the structure that you know, but just lighter, fresher, and a bit drier. This is fantastic out of a shower. This is great if you're just relaxing at night. You don't want a heavy fragrance. So it's just like a more casual, slightly more modern version of Pour Un Homme. People say it has weak performance, but I don't know what you've got plugged up your nose, because when I spray on this, I'm good to go. But that's just me. However, this didn't sell well either. And the problem is prominent lavender notes. 2010s, 2010 through 2020, I guess, that whole 2010s period was a really bad time for lavender forward fragrances. If you were making a very lavender fragrance in the 2010s, you weren't going to do well, because everyone wanted bubblegum, they wanted juniper berries, they wanted fruits, they wanted sweet, they wanted baked goods and praline and chestnut and all that bullshit. So they didn't want a traditional, old school lavender. Even if it was fresh, even if it was salty, even if you dressed it up, modernized it, they just didn't want it. Now, the exception of the rule, of course, is Sauvage. Things like Lunar Rossa Carbon. But you have to realize that the reason why Sauvage and Lunar Rossa Carbon get away with having lavender in them is they squeeze all of the fucking life out of the lavender. They take the lavender and they run it under a steamroller and they blast it with ultraviolet radiation. They bleach it, they dry it out in the sun, they chop it up, they reconstitute it, turn it into a can of Pringles, and then they put it in your bottle. So it's still lavender, from a chemical point of view, but it's not anything the human brain really recognizes as lavender. I smell Lunar Rossa Carbon, and it's like Cyberpunk 2077, right? And Sauvage is even worse. So, and I like both of those fragrances. So I'm saying this with love and care, but any kind of lifelike lavender fragrance wasn't going to do well. So this, unfortunately, however nice it is, it just came out at the wrong time. Now, in 2022, we would see two more flankers. The first two proper flankers from the Jacques Jensen era, because, like I said, the Rothschilds took over Caron in 2019. They were originally going to keep William Fraisse, but I guess Ariane de Rothschild had a personal relationship with perfumer Jean Jacques. You see them two holding hands all the time like they're in love or something, so I'm guessing they got a thing going on. So, William Fraisse, you got to go. The boyfriend has your job now. Sucks to be you. Go work for Firmenich or something. So he was sent packing, and all of his perfumes were discontinued, which sucks because I like them. Jean Jacques does seem to have a good grasp of what qualifies a good Caron fragrance. So far, all of his work that he's done for Caron has been a winner in my book, and these are no exception. So these two flankers are a pair, and they came out in 2022, and they are Pour Un Homme Le Soir and Pour Un Homme Le Matin. So if William Fraisse was kind of borrowing the scent profile of Petit Matin, Masculine Pluriel. If William Fraisse was borrowing the structure of Masculine Pluriel and then Caronifying it when he made Sport, then Jean Jacques was looking at Francis Kurkdjian as well. But this time he wasn't borrowing the scent structure, he was borrowing the nomenclature with the whole Pour le Soir, Pour le Matin thing that MFK did early on. He got rid of all those, but he did that early on. Kind of picked up that ball and did that here. So you get the Pour Un Homme Le Soir, Pour Un Homme Le Matin, and day, night, right? Daytime, nighttime. Ha ha ha. So original, so fresh, so new. Not really. The day-night flankers are actually really good. However, Le Matin is the least like Pour Un Homme out of any flanker you will ever smell. If people were confused by sport, they will be even more confused by this, since this is a proper fougere. So it is not just lavender, vanilla, and tonka anymore. It's lavender and geranium and bergamot and oak moss and tonka. A proper fougere? What? It only took them 90 years to do it, but they finally made a proper fougere. Yes. Now, this is not an old school fougere. This is not going to smell like Fougere Royale. This is not going to smell like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. This is not an old school fougere, okay? You're not going to get the old school fougere. What you're going to get here is more of a 80s, 90s style aromatic, fresh, clean sort of thing. So think Enrico Coveri, think Giacomo, anthracite pour l'homme with the clary sage and the wormwood and the cyclamen, white florals, the lavender geranium. There's ginger in here. There's lemon in here. There's oak moss. There is patchouli. It does have a bit of a modern sort of Elysium Aventus Cologne vibe, but it's very brief. Like the opening moments, the very opening moments give you that Elysium Aventus Cologne vibe, and it goes into fougere after that. So you're safe if you don't like those. You're safe. You just got to wait out the first 30 seconds, and it becomes just like something like that 80s, 90s bridge era of fresh fougere, right? Really nice. I like it. Then last but not least, not so much to say about this, but the Pour Un Homme Le Soir. It's just basically Pour Un Homme with iris. So if you ever wondered what Pour Un Homme smelled like if you layered over Dior Homme or put some Prada in there, you know, Caron Pour Un Homme if done by Prada. So it's got your lavender, it's got your tonka, it's got your vanilla, and then it's got big iris, big plonk iris right in the middle. So, you know, if you're something that, if you like your gentleman Givenchy, like Eau de Toilette Intense or Eau de Parfum, that whole iris thing, Valentino Uomo Intense, if that's your kind of thing, but you want it done with Caron with the lavender, this is you all the way. And there you have it, guys. Caron Pour Un Homme, the full range. Hopefully you learned something. Any